Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, Saka here, and welcome back to Planet Zoo. And as you can tell by the style of the video and perhaps the title and thumbnail, we're doing something a little bit different than just playing here. We are going to set up Bristol Motor Speedway right in the center of our zoo as sort of a focal piece and a center point, and a really cool place for an exhibit. And I've got an idea of what animal I would like to put in the center of the last great Coliseum. If you're not familiar with Bristol Motor Speedway, it is a short track in Bristol, Tennessee that is 0.533 miles in length. So one of the shorter tracks on the NASCAR Cup Series circuit. Very steep, high banks, and known for its crashes and for its distinct architecture. When they say it's the last great Coliseum, it is sort of shaped like the great Roman Colosseum, so that's what we're going to try to do today. Now, I've laid out the roads here, just some pathing to get my bearings. The track will not be able to be walked on because of the banking, and the paths really don't like to be at an angle or have any banking to it. The paths like to be flat in Planet Zoo, so the track is essentially going to be just geometry pieces, and the exhibit will have a path where the infield is surrounding on the inner side of the racetrack up to the racing surface there. Basically, we laid out 600 feet for the front stretch and the back stretch there, and just close the end. One good thing about Bristol is it's sort of symmetrical in two different axes, which can help us. We can translate the pieces from one side of the track and get them to the other. The front and back stretch is banked 9 degrees, so it's very difficult for me to sort of eyeball it without typing in 9 degrees, but the track is also 40 foot wide, so we have these two 20-foot segments side by side, as you can see, and we are just going to copy and paste those the entire length of the straightaway. You can sort of see me pulling away the straight bits of the path, and now I have my extents. Building with primitives is very time-consuming. I couldn't scale them. If I could scale these things to be, 600 foot long and 40 feet wide, like you might do in, say, a 3D editing software or something, this would be one piece, easy peasy, off you go. But it's not bad. We can do a lot of copy-paste, selecting the group, sliding them on over, and basically, making less work for us. And then once we get one side of the track done, we would be able to copy that and move that, rotate it 180 degrees, and flip it around. The problem is going to come with the bank. On the extreme ends of the racetrack, on the apexes, in between turn 1 and 2 and between turn 3 and 4, that is 25 degrees of banking, and that's going to be really easy to set. But as the track connects to the front straightaway, you have to go from the 9-degree transition to the 25-degree transition in a way that kind of makes sense. And with these very straight geometric pieces, that's tough to do. You can't have a nice slope without doing a lot. It's kind of like pixel art. If you try to make a nice smooth round ball in a 10 by 10 pixel image, it's going to look a little bit more jaggy than if you had a 100 by 100 image. And I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time with very, very small geometric pieces, sort of leveling it out. So we did our best guess here. And like I said, the people are not going to be walking on the racing surface anyway. So we're just basically laying out the banking at the most extreme end, the 25 degrees, right at the apex between turn 3 and 4, as it were, right here. And we're going to try to rotate these parts and keep the banking as consistent as possible for the end. I'm lining up the inside of the racetrack to the inside of the path, as I got a Google measurement off of maps, and it is 200 feet between the end of the straightaway before the turn all the way to the apex, so that's how I got the corner radius there. And it's 500 feet in between the inside of the back stretch and the inside of the front stretch, so we basically have a 500-foot rectangle that we can use as pathing and our exhibit. Now, Bristol Motor Speedway has a tunnel, it has a walk path over turn 3 in real life. There is no tunnel that goes under the racetrack of Bristol, but we're going to have a walk path that goes underneath the track and underneath the grandstands for this particular version, as I didn't want to punch a big hole in the side of the racetrack here. Now this part of the build was the bane of my existence, trying to get the corner radius to smooth out a bit and, you know, get the banking transition nice and easy. It's going to sort of look like piano keys by the time we're done. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be as smooth as I had envisioned and hoped, but with these rectangle pieces, we have to do what we can do without the scaling options. We can try to rotate it down a little bit to make a little bit of an incline up the racing surface, but if you haven't seen Bristol Motor Speedway in action or haven't been there yourself, it's kind of hard to describe the transition from the front stretch to the banking. It will throw the car to the side, and I have some videos on my channel where I raced the sim version of Bristol Motor Speedway if you want to see what the racetrack looks from the driver's perspective. And that's one thing that I talked to my YouTube tutor about. I'm very fortunate to work with on a monthly basis with B00-100 of Minecraft fame, and he is all about the aesthetics and making things look great. And he talks a lot about the feel of a location, that when you get down to the ground level and you take a look, you have that instinct inside of you, especially if you're doing something familiar to you, that when you see it, you just know exactly where you are. And that's what I tried to do for this racetrack here, is get down to the car level and take a look at that banking transition. You can sort of see it there. So we'll get rid of the path under that turn, and like I said, the track is symmetrical on 2 axes, so we can actually rotate this a little bit and get it inside turn 1, and we can have that corner of the track done. Now, unfortunately, we cannot mirror. That would be the next thing that I would do to make my life a whole lot easier, is mirror turns 1 and turns 3. Just mirror them to turns 2 and 4. But unfortunately, we cannot do such things as these, so we'll have to build out turns 2 and 4, well, just one of them, and just copy and move it to the other corner. So this was probably the toughest part of the build for sure, is getting the banking. We've got a good flow here, so we can just copy the edges here, and when we're satisfied, we'll make the track one group. Yeah, just fighting with this thing over 3 hours of building, compressed into 40 minutes for you, with some commentary about the process. And if you were interested in building something in Planet Zoo, or wonder how people build, you can sort of see the process here. I cut out some things of me just faffing around and trying and failing some different things. So the video that you see is basically my final project and the parts that do make it to the final version. Getting the track built on the inside is the toughest part. We will also do the grandstands in this episode. We won't go into the details so much as individual rows and individual seats. That would just kill me. And if it took me 3 hours just to get down the track in the basic rough shape of the grandstands, it would take forever for me to do an actual seating. But this banking and transition is looking really good. You just grab a few parts here, copy, move them, rotate them, and complete that. I'm really liking how that is looking. So I think turns 2 and 4 will look better than 1 and 2. But once again, right here, we're going to have to start thinking about that transition going from 24 degrees to 9. So we're going to start rotating the pieces just a bit to get that smooth transition. Of course, if you were trying to run a car over this surface, you would have bumps and gaps in the track, but from a distance, it will look just fine. We'll be focusing more on the animals that we put in the center of this racetrack, their exhibit, than the actual racetrack itself. This is sort of just an aesthetic for them. So this was me trying to move some pieces over from the other side, and then I thought, hey, why don't I just flip it? And that's actually negative 25 degrees and wouldn't help us in the least bit. So we have to do it the ye old-fashioned way and just go piece by piece at a time, almost build it like Lego. So, you know, getting this transition nice and easy. After my struggles with turn 3, I come at turn 2 with a little bit better understanding of what I have to do. Just lining it up So at a quick glance, it lines up and looks okay. And like I said, Planet Zoo is meant to be seen from a distance, and you know, it's just the feeling that we're going for. We're not going for 100% accuracy and trying to build something in real life down to the last millimeter, but just get the feel that if someone who is familiar with Bristol Motor Speedway takes a look at the build, they would instantly identify it as Bristol Motor Speedway and say, hey, yeah, I got you. You know, I feel you. I know what you're going for, and that is what I'm trying to accomplish here. One thing that, you know, I was trying to mess with is the grouping. With Planet Coaster, I didn't do too many big builds, so I wasn't familiar with the big group tools and, you know, the finer keystrokes and all the stuff that would make this job easy. But the advanced movement tool is where I was working a lot here. I didn't do much free movement. I wanted to keep everything on one axis, either just slide it laterally or slide it across the way. But now that we have that section of the track done, we can actually take this entire end of the racetrack, copy, rotate it 180 degrees, and now we'll have a pretty good copy. I'm just lining it up there with the racing surface and getting it right on the edge of that path, and then that way I can see how much I need to remove from this front stretch here. You can sort of see it clipping there. So you just fine tune, delete some pieces, move them in, see if it lines up as it should. And this was actually a pretty good guesstimate as far as the distance is concerned. We'll have to line it up along this axis here though, and we're not too far off in the grand scheme of things. I mean, you know, I guess maybe 6 inches. We'll just cover that up with another piece that will be on this side and not the other. And we do have to extend the racetrack a bit in this direction. Once again, you can see that little gap. But it's starting to come together. We can delete the path that we've made as a guide and delete that tree. That's absolutely pointless. I was looking for pavement right here. If we could paint asphalt, and then I thought, well, how about dirt? What does that look like? So I spattered down some dirt there, and then it's time to start to build the grandstand. So from the edge of the racetrack outward to the edge of the grandstand is 200 feet, and it is a constant radius right with the racetrack, so we can sort of eyeball that corner. And right now I'm just basically building up what the grandstand will sit on. And the great thing about these particular grandstands and most grandstands is this actually forms a right angle triangle, and we have two set distances. We have the 200 feet from the outside of the racing surface, and we've got 89 feet up. It's 9 stories tall, so with those two distances in mind, the triangle will complete itself. So we're just basically doing what we did for the racetrack here for the grandstands. We're going to make one row at an angle that the grandstands would be at, and it will join up down there on the bottom. So once we get the basic line going, just get a few more pieces here extended out, we'll do this in chunks, and there we go. That's the top level of the grandstands, and now it's the finicky part of selecting just that row. I could have control clicked and got them in order, but no worries. As we build more levels here and get that on angle, we'll be able to just keep on selecting more and more, copying them more and more, and you know, get it done in half the time. But I was just taking a look and see if that is going to line up the way I'm hoping it will line up, and indeed it does look pretty good. I'm selecting some trees in the background though. You may see me select those trees in the background and just delete them so I'm not copying them. Just focusing on the grandstand itself. Now once we have these grandstand, or this main grandstand piece, we'll be able to copy this chunk and start duplicating it around the racetrack, as luckily the grandstands are pretty symmetrical too. There's no special grandstand like perhaps at Daytona or something like that, where you would have one grandstand that sticks above all the others. Bristol, you've got your constant grandstand all the way around like the Coliseum. So that's going to make this job a whole lot easier. So we're going to get the secondary level here and just drop this a little bit closer down to the bottom. the bracing goes about halfway up the back of these supports. So we'll just get the top level where there would be suites and facilities and whatnot, and get the bracing down to the bottom. Bristol's main colors are red and white. Being an SMI track, red, white, and blue are definitely the main color schemes of these racetracks, and Bristol is primarily red and white, so we're going to have a red backdrop here. Luckily, these cubes are massive in the grand scheme of things. We haven't actually looked at this racetrack, and you can see a little bit there what the scale is going to be. A little bit later in the episode, I'll go down to ground level with a person and look up at this racetrack just to sort of get the feel. If we were to look at this racetrack from the zoo, will it look as big and imposing as the racetrack does? So I was looking for materials for my supports here. I decided on concrete eventually. I was just sort of looking at a reference photo here, and it definitely looked more gray, whether that be steel or concrete. And then I like the look of these things, and considering that we're building the self-reported the last great Coliseum, these concrete blocks with the Ionian lines through the middle of it definitely fits the motif. And I'm just sort of spitballing the distance here, eyeballing the distance between the supports. And then once we get a 45-degree brace going across, we can see where they intersect and get that spacing a little bit better. That's not freehand. So we'll grab this, rotate this bad boy 45 degrees, and I decided to pull copy one on axis and just slide it over so everything lined up right in a row. And we can sort of see here that given the distance, we can scoot these guys over or just roll with what we've got. And these are going to go right to the tippy top. We do need a second one there, so we'll just slide these guys on over. See if we can get away without making a second one, and, you know, close enough for government work. It's sort of like Minecraft. Everything you build will sort of stay in place when you place it. So now it is a lot of copying, and I'm seeing what every row looks like, whether or not that's going to give us the structural integrity and enough triangles, and it definitely feels necessary to brace every single vertical post with a 45 degree. Then we're going to come back across, copy these 45 degree braces, rotate them 180 degrees, and just copy them on back. And here we go. We can start to get a feel of how big the grandstand is looking at it from the zoo. I've got an idea of how I want it to look upon its final build. This particular episode, we're going to get the basic outline. We're going to rough it in. If you do 3D modeling or painting or anything artistic such as that nature, you know you don't go 100% detail right from the get-go. You make sure you have a good shape, a good silhouette, a good block first, and then you go in with all of your fine details. So this particular episode will get all of the grandstands down, the track, which you can see there, and the fencing. So we can have just the bare bones needed for the racetrack. And then in the next episode, we'll work on billboards on the outside of these things. We'll work on the maybe the gates or the suites on top. There are these big white viewing boxes from on top of the grandstands that stick out above these particular grandstands, and they're not symmetrical, so that's where we can go in and fine-tune our approach. Just getting rid of the second layer there with a save. Sokka's Sanctuary is nice and saved. I think I have a good basic grandstand here, so I merge everything into one part, just copy it, rotate it 180 degrees, and line up those supports with the supports that I put in before to get that nice, you know, right across the way mirror. And then we can actually use this to fill out the front and back stretch. Just line it up as so, making sure that the supports are right next to each other or even on top of each other right there. And because it's a copied piece, it should line up perfectly as so. And just like the corners at the apex, the grandstand will be, you know, pretty easy. We just rotate it 90 degrees in place. Where we're going to run into trouble, once again, is the turn transitions in between turn 1 and 2, and in between 2 in the backstretch. Once we get the grandstands set, we can just copy those as this is a symmetrical racetrack. My idea here was to place the grandstands up a little bit. You can probably see where I'm going to go wrong with that thinking. Just trying to line everything up would be a monster, headache that I don't want to deal with. Once I got these grandstands copied in place and I looked at that transition between the corner grandstand and the front stretch grandstand, I'm like, no, that's not going to fly. It's going to be easier for me to fill the gaps if everything was level, instead of trying to fill in the gap between ground level and this raised level. And plus it wouldn't be straight across as a symmetrical Coliseum would. And there's another look. Starting to really fill out. We're starting to see the size. And this is a one-to-one recreation as close as I could get with the measurements. I could not, like I said, put down a 600-foot length of polygon and say, well, there's my benchmark, that's 600 feet. So there's our grandstand going down ground level. Now I can rotate and sort of fill in the corners as best I can, and then I will get a filler grandstand, if you will, to fill in the gaps, and hopefully these gaps are enough separated. The angles are right. We've rotated at 45-degree angles, so the angles are dead on. I'm just hoping my spacing is okay. We're going to see if my spacing was good whenever we copy this filler piece here. But basically, just getting this post up right next to the white, and since the red and the white are the exact same piece, just recolored, they should line up evenly. And then it's sort of blocking this out. We're sort of squaring off the circle, if that makes any sense. If we wanted to do this right, we would have probably another segment in here. We would do 2 small wall segments in between here to make a smoother rotation. But this is Planet Zoo. This is not a track that I'm actually going to be racing on under heavy scrutiny. So just getting the feel. That's what we're going for this Bristol Motor Speedway track. Right now I'm looking at a way to copy the lattice underneath. And I'm like, okay, is this part of a group? Can I group the wood together? And I decided, nope, not worth it. We are just going to build it from scratch. Rotate these things at 45 degrees. Once we get a few pieces down and rotated, it is not going to be bad at all to copy and paste and fill out the remainder. And with this thing being at an awkward angle, we can't just keep it right on axis like we could for the last one. So this one is a lot of lining parts up, placing one, getting the next vertical section in line, and just continuing that on. And really methodically taking this one piece at a time, trying to line it up as best we can, because this is our copy. If we can do it well enough, we can just copy this on around and then mirror or just rotate 180 degrees to the other side of the track and, do half the work, essentially, or a quarter of the work. Once we're done, we just have to make sure that the 1/4 work that we do is good, and everything else should fall into place. Going forward with this series, if everyone likes this idea and thinks that this is a pretty good approach to the zoo, I could make some iconic buildings from around NASCAR. In particular, say the Pagoda from Indianapolis, or the grandstands of Pocono with those spires or whatever. Just do some iconic things to where as you proceed through this zoo, you'll be visiting the NASCAR schedule. And if you've been a fan of my channel or saw my other videos, it would make sense to why I do that. I'm a huge racing fan, and I have to thank BOO for the inspiration to do this. He mentioned, what can you do in Planet Zoo that would connect with your base audience? So putting a NASCAR track in the middle of a zoo would definitely be unorthodox and definitely fit the channel for sure. So that is why I'm going ahead and doing this. Plus, it's a challenge for me. I'm not known as a builder. I'm not known as a creative type. In my Kerbal Space Program videos, I was very methodical and process-oriented instead of the flash and the beauty-oriented. So, it's a challenge for sure, and probably the reason why this took 3 hours to get the base level down, because I really am not familiar with this approach of building. But I do have a basic workflow from 3D modeling that definitely translated over, and in fact I was, like I said, a little bit frustrated that some of the tools in 3D modeling are not here for me to use. Just a scale tool would have been immeasurably better than building this piece by piece and grouping a bunch of parts together. Even if I could have just scaled one piece for the front stretch, one piece for the back stretch, that would have saved me a good hour to an hour and a half. Cut my work time in half with just one simple tool. Maybe Frontier can make that happen. I don't know how hard it would be to implement a scale tool or how breaking it would be. You just think about the things that these architecture pieces are. If they are solid objects and they scale up with the bounding box, scale up with it, what kind of trouble would that be for pathing? So for gameplay considerations, I would definitely see why there is no scale tool. But if you just wanted to use Planet Zoo as a builder to plop down some cool, interesting stuff, the scale tool would be awesome. But like I said, we're building a tunnel under these grandstands, and we'll come out in the infield of that racetrack there, so we don't have to worry about them, the people interacting with the solid parts of the racetrack or going up into the stands. And yeah, I'm liking the feel of that for sure. I think if we could copy that and just sort of double it to fill in this semicircle, that would be really cool. So we're going to give that a try, see if it fits. A little bit finagling, a little bit rotating, a little bit free rotate. It doesn't line up 100%, but from the distance, it looks good. The big problem is going to be getting the grandstand in that corner, which is our next order of business. Basically, I just copied that group to see if they would fit in the places that we have these grandstands, and you can see that one may be a little bit too narrow. It would suck to have to rebuild that just for that section, but it would be quicker to do it that way than move the grandstand over and just a little bit and rebuild the whole thing, especially since these parts are lining up well. And, that's the only piece that doesn't seem to line up as well as the others. So now we've got an idea that our basic grandstand and lattice system will work, and now it's time to get the corner grandstand. Now this will be flatter, of course, with this sweeping corner. In real life, it's a nice smooth arc. It's a semicircle. It goes around the radius of the racetrack. But because we are using square pieces and there was no good radius piece to scale out, we're going to have to do this sort of Lego style, if that makes any sense. So we're basically going to fill in this gap here from the bottom to the top and make a triangle that is on that particular angle. Just sort of fill in the middle. There's going to be some clipping, but it kind of adds to the aesthetic, I feel, of the different sections of the grandstand. With those pieces and the different shading there, it feels like, the grandstands were built in sections, which is just sort of a happy accident. And, not a repercussion, but a result of what we're doing here, just copying and extending pieces over. So now we're starting to get some section work done. And of course, this isn't as I said before, a one-to-one model. So these sections are not going to line up with real-life sections of Bristol grandstands, but the size is what matters. Regardless of popular opinion, the size does matter in this case, and it's on point. It's one-to-one. As close as we can get it with these primitives, that is for sure. And once we get some pieces laid down, you can see how easy it is to copy, paste, move it up. Everything is the same angle. We're not trying to do progressive banking in the grandstands. The bottom part is no flatter than the top part, as some racetracks are. So we're just going to go straight up at a standard angle and just fill in this gap. We'll probably do some patchwork right along the corners to make it look like perhaps that's a walkway up through the grandstands. It's a nice, it's twofold. It covers up the seam for one, and two, it gives it the feeling that there is a path going all the way to the tippy top, all 8 stories of Grandstand, just walking up that monster. So we'll just finish off the top here. Once we get this section done, we will have a complete corner section of Grandstand, if you will, and luckily we can delete those top parts and get all the way to the back. And this part will be covered up by those white suites that I was talking about that sort of overhang these grandstands, or sits right on top of grandstand level. And that will complete the look of the grandstands once we get those in. Yeah, everything is looking good. Always going back to a wider angle to make sure that we're looking okay. And as we continue to build this, we are on the right track, pun intended. Because if it starts looking like Pocono, we've done something wrong. All right, so we've got a little bit of a hole there, not bad. We could fill those in. And in this particular lighting, it does feel like it is a smoother transition. All right, let's get these guys out of the way here, deselect the grandstand chunk, get these out of the way, and select our corner pieces and slide them in. Of course, the tree decides to get involved. No thank you, Rebel Tree. We merge them into one section here, and this was the part that didn't exactly line up. There's a little bit of a gap, and that is where our patchwork is going to come into play right there. You can sort of see the gap in the grandstand there, but the other sections do line up kind of snug. Like, I'm not going to lie, for free-handing the radius of the corner and using straight pieces, you know, it's looking really good. Feeling really fine about that for sure. So we'll get this settled and get our patchwork in. And yeah, just sort of see how it looks. And once we have one half of the grandstands built, we can just merge that up into one section, copy it, and rotate it 180 degrees, and our job will be done. So let's go ahead and fill out this section. That piece right there decided to become part of that group, and I didn't want it to be. I want it to be completely separate here. So there we go, let's patchwork, and luckily these pieces are wide enough that it covers the entire gap, and I'm just going up the angle of the grandstand here, and it could be the lighting, but we're not seeing that that clipping as we're moving these pieces up. It looked cool to have stairs there, but as you can see, it's starting to smooth out and give that illusion of smoothness already in this particular light. I haven't looked at it in all kinds of lighting, different parts of the day. The track will have lights, just as Bristol Motor Speedway does, and I'm hoping it looks as cool as at night as it does in this sort of sunset. But yeah, just grabbing this group, merging it up, and now there's another walkway, easy peasy. Just selecting these lines and scooting them over. The copy tool is much, much appreciated. We'll rotate this a little bit to give that feeling of a curve, and that definitely looks like a, you know, stairway. Granted, it only looks like it's maybe 6 or 7 different rows, but it's got that feeling of grandstands for sure, or stadium seating, as the last great Coliseum does. So 2 more patches right along the side, right there, along the backstretch grandstand, and then yeah, that's looking really good. So now it is time to look at some photos and just sort of see, is that the kind of look that we're going for? And I'm happy with it. Let's save Sokka's Sanctuary once again. We'll select those grandstands, make it one object, so when we copy it, we can just move it all in one big chunk. We don't have to worry about selecting just one individual part. And there we go, merge them together, line them up. We have those white posts there, just sort of getting it laterally placed, and with that widget so far in, we have to zoom in a bit and lose our way, but that's feeling good. The entire track is surrounded by a grandstand. I try to merge everything up, but there's over 1,000 pieces in this, and it wouldn't let us group it. So the next thing, in order for the fins to be down, we need the wall right along the edge of the racetrack. So we grabbed a piece here, colored it white. We're not going to worry about the safer barriers and double layer walls. We're just going to go old school Bristol and just have a concrete border right there. And same process as the racetrack, we get a couple copies. Once we make a copy, we make a copy, we make a copy, we make a copy, and it exponentially grows down the length of the straightaway, and before we know it, we have an entire wall section on the straightaway. That little grassy area there won't be seen by the public. I don't know if I want to just sort of paint that down, but I think at this distance and with the fence up, we're not going to see much anyway, and it's kind of dark, so that could be the walkway that photographers hang out along the fence. We have some grass poking up through the racetrack. Don't worry, I'll paint the entire track area short grass so it doesn't poke through. And there we go. We have a front stretch and a back stretch wall, easy peasy. Now, if only this was a drag strip, which Bristol Motor Speedway does have a drag strip, but that isn't what we are building today. So I'm experimenting with angles, seeing if I can get the wall to angle up nice and easy. And once again, working with straight, solid polygons, you can't really rotate a massive chunk without losing fine detail. So unfortunately, getting the wall along the banking is going to be tough. We're going to raise it up just a skosh and sort of stair-step it. Keep it right along against the track. Like I said, this will not be seen by the public, as their walk path will be just inside the racing surface, and from their point of view, it will look like a standard wall right along the racetrack. And I actually am like really excited to get this exhibit that I'm thinking of inside Bristol Motor Speedway and look at it from a person's point of view, just to sort of see the feeling that we get when you're inside a NASCAR track and you happen to have animals on the inside of your infield. I mean, what was it, Virginia Tech and Tennessee played football, college football in the middle of Bristol, and we've got a good feeling right there. Just looking nice and awesome. And I think it would serve well for animals. Luckily, I have an even transition on the downturn, so I can just copy and paste some of the wall section. We'll have to drop some of this section here and just extend this wall out. It's mainly just finding pieces you can copy and move and rotate. Once we get to the wall section and it becomes a constant arc, that will make wall building much, much easier, as we will be able to just copy larger sections of the wall. It's just that transition going from the banking to the flat that is the most shocking for very straight pieces. So now we're starting to get around the edge. We've got the wall there. Once we add the fence, it will complete the ensemble and make it really look like it is a concrete wall holding up a chain link fence. And thankfully, Planet Zoo does indeed have a chain link fence. It's meant to keep animals in, but we're going to be building separate walls for our exhibit for the animals in the infield. So they won't even be up on this catch fence. It's just there for aesthetic purposes. And now we can really start to copy and paste those wall sections longer, and I'm happy to see that it lines up. We did a good job copying little sections of the banking so that all of these pieces that we're copying do line up and almost snap together as if they were meant to. Of course, the apex arc is where would be the tightest part, but it's a pretty standard radius turn until you start to bottom out there. So we'll fine tune this, and just like we did with the other side, once we get half the wall built around the racetrack, we can just copy and move it to the other side. That's the good thing of working with symmetry, is we can just do a lot of copying over. So right here, I'm trying to find, what we could copy. Could we copy a bigger chunk on over? Do we need to keep it nice and easy? And if I have done my maths correctly, this should even out. And indeed, even this longer section, we're cutting off a little bit of the racing surface on the outside, but no worse for the wear. The feel is continuing on. And then as the track, straightens out, we're going to have to pull pieces from the opposite side of the racetrack to get that radius. And unfortunately, we couldn't, mirror and then flip it to get exactly the same measurements on both sides of the racetrack. We had to freehand both turns, and you can sort of see me looking down the edge of the wall and realizing that we're going to be a little bit off. We're going to have to push our approach out just a little bit scoot this wall down and see how it lines up. And we're actually almost lined up with the other wall here. We're going to have to start coming a little bit straighter out to connect this wall. So I figure let's just move it on out, raise up these pieces and see what we are up against. And if I'm happy with it, then we'll just copy it. Nice transition. We're halfway around, let's do it. So we'll deselect those grandstands, deselect the piece of track, make that one item, copy, flip 180 degrees, and then line it up like so. So now that we have the entire wall selected, we're going to save that as one big group as wall. 2,751 unique pieces, and now it's time for the chain link. And I didn't look and see exactly how tall the chain link was, but I went with 16 feet and just sort of felt right. Once again, going for that feel and just going 66-foot chunks, and luckily we can keep on keeping on and just follow the length of the wall, and you can sort of see how the fence shrinks down as the wall goes up. The fence maintains its height, but the wall does not. We just sort of finagle that a little bit, getting the feel. We can go in and change that later if we want to. I actually run into a problem on the backside, so I start doing the other side, just going around turn 4, as you see. Just putting these down, increasing the height of the fence. Ideally, what we would do is have like an overhang rather than a straight fence, just like straight up. It's a catch fence. It's meant to catch cars and sheet metal and things that might be flying off of the cars from getting into the grandstand. And I thought, you know, why not? Let's just make this straight. Let's see exactly how straight we were. So I turn on angle snapping to 90, and you can sort of see we're off. As we continue up the racetrack, we get off by a few feet. So I didn't line it up exactly, and I was bound and determined to angle snap this straight. So now we're a foot the other wrong way. And at 66 feet, it's like distance shooting. If you're off, the longer your shot, the less margin of error you have to hit your target. And that was kind of what we were going for there. But when I got around to turns 1 and 2, I could not connect the fence. And I was like, what's going on? And I turn and I see, yes, indeed, there was a path there. So we got rid of the path, and then we were able to connect up the fence like so. And I just raised up this side to match, and everything should be fine as far as the fencing goes. It felt like it snapped there. That's why I raised it up a little bit higher than normal. But there we go. Now it's time to just paint some short grass right along the racetrack, so no little blades of grass are going to pop up through the racetrack. The path itself will be right along, and here is our feel from the zoo. So nice and monstrous. But that will do it for me and this episode, ladies and gentlemen, of Planet Zoo. Like, share, and subscribe if you are so bold. Thank you so much for tuning in. And next episode, we will finish up with another speed build of Bristol Motor Speedway. Take care.